This is a very ordinary flower pot. I saw the man take out an orange, take a seed out of it, then put the seeds in the pot. Infused with magic, the seeds started to germinate so fast it grows into a 3-day-old tree. In a few seconds come to bear fruit. The man picked off to throw it to the audience, and the audience to verify it's really a real orange. It's amazing. Man named Edward is a top magician. He had a lucky and unfortunate childhood. Luckily at a young age he was ordered by the expert, found my interest performing magic, then also because of magic attracted a little girl, Sophie. The seeds of love begin to sprout. Unfortunately Sophie is a rich lady. Her family won't allow her to associate with a poor boy. The two can only date secretly, enjoy a short pleasure. One night when the two tried to elope, unfortunately being followed by Sophie's family, they were quickly caught. Sophie is forcibly dragged away. Edward was also severely warned, if there is another time, I will kill your whole family. Young Edward was still scared. After all, I had no choice but to cut off my love thread and go far away. 15 years later, Edward has become a master of magic. His performances are always very hot. Even the prince came to watch. Near the end, Edward proposed that an audience member be on stage. However, as soon as the words fell, the prince stood up. Lee saw that his fiancée was Sophie. Edward recognized her immediately, but Sophie didn't recognize her. If that's the case, let's continue the show. The assistant put on a red robe for Sophie. Edward took her to a mirror, put on the hat and let her follow the instructions to do actions. Raise your hand in the mirror first, then turn around. Everything is normal when you bow next. The self in the mirror doesn't follow. Another person appeared behind the emergency holding a sword. Sophie hurriedly looked back. No one here at the time of coercion. The man used a sniper sword, directly hacked her in the mirror. There was a sudden exclamation from the audience. I saw Edward holding out his palm. There was actually a puff of smoke. With the blue smoke slowly drifting out of the mirror, Sophie passed out on the spot. Bravo. Sophie's appearance had a great impact on Edward. Then the prince approached Edward personally and invited her to play in the palace. Edward readily agreed and mentioned a sentence at the time of parting, maybe I'll make you disappear. This moment woke up Sophie. The next day she sneaked into Edward's carriage. The two still love each other deeply. It's just that love is very restrained in order to save face. However, the meeting was passed on to the chief of police. She's the prince's man. She immediately got Edward to educate her, tell her not to mess around. The show at the palace will begin soon. The prince blew hard on the stage, said he would debunk all the magic tricks tonight. Edward is standing in front of a blank sheet of paper. I saw her move her hand. The blank paper reveals the portrait of the current king. The audience immediately praised. Only the prince doesn't care. She immediately went to the stage pointing at the painting. Then Edward was searched in disregard of industry rules. The audience can't stand it anymore. They want to stop fighting with her. This made the prince a little embarrassed to save face. She wants Edward to perform a trick without props. Edward said no problem, then borrowed her accessories. This is a magnificent sword. I saw Edward standing on the ground with his sword. Let go. The sword seems to have not moved. Then she started telling the story of the sword and the stone. Said many people tried to draw the sword, but only Arthur succeeded because he is the only true king. A minister is invited to the stage to draw his sword. One hand is not enough. Add another hand, but this sword is like hate on the ground. Can't pull it out at all. The minister had no choice but to retreat. Edward then invited a young nobleman. So, does he no matter how hard I ate and sucked, I couldn't move it. Now it's the prince's turn. I thought it would be easy, but I didn't expect that he didn't pull it. He immediately looked at Edward, but Edward beat him tonight. Some people in the audience began to boo, saying that he is not the real king. The prince turned pale with anger. Edward just released the mechanism, made him pull out the accessory. I'm here to debunk Edward's trick. I was humiliated. The prince immediately announced the end of the show. Let the chief of police put Edward on hold at the end. Sophie asked Edward why he was so stupid. Sophie came to the door at night. Edward can no longer control himself. Kissed directly after Yanu. Sophie revealed a big secret. The prince is planning to usurp the throne, and he is also in great danger in his plan. The next day Edward was on the move. First withdraw all bank deposits, then I packed my luggage and kissed Sophie goodbye and arranged for a helper. But this time the chief saw it all. He immediately went to the prince and guessed that the two of them seemed to be dying. The prince was furious at night. Resist, slapped Sophie, and Sophie is not used to his problems. Just shake your face and leave. Prince's lungs exploded, chasing all the way into the horse ticket. Just hear a scream. Then Sophie came out on horseback. The security guard looked dumbfounded. Sophie's horse went home by itself. The next day there's a puddle of blood on the back. The crowd immediately launched a carpet search, finally found Sophie in a river. Edward was the first to jump into the river and come to Sophie's side, but Sophie has renounced and died. Edward wailing. Soon the chief came over. After inspection, it was found that Sophie got stabbed in the neck, died from blood loss. In addition, the medical examiner found a ruby in her dress. Very strange. Edward directly pointed out that the prince killed her. In fact, the director is also very clear, but how dare he catch the prince? So the case is over. Soon Edward bought a dilapidated theater. Ray enacted the magic. I saw him stretch out his palm. A ghost appeared on the next table facing questions from the audience. He can answer simply, but soon he was taken back by Edward. The audience is still unsatisfied. They don't think it's magic, it's that Edward can actually summon ghosts. In this way, Edward quickly attracted a group of fanatical supporters. The clergy also used this to preach the immortality of the soul, saying Edward's acting is correct. They even want to create a religious republic. This has threatened the country's rule. The prince immediately ordered Edward's arrest for fraud, but everything needs a proof before it's proven that it's a trick. the chief is really not good at catching people. So a policeman sneaked into the theater that night to investigate, but soon he was thrown out the door. Edward's show continues. There was a fat lady who was frightened and cried, claims to have seen a ghost child on the street. The chief didn't believe it at first until the ghost child runs through the palm of a spectator walked under his nose. The chief took Edward down that night. Supporters are very dissatisfied. Direct pass to surround the police station. The chief said that if those people attack the police station, then you're guilty. Edward also realized the seriousness of the situation. Then go to the balcony. Said that what he performed was magic, not real. Can't summon ghosts by myself, can't bring people back to life. The supporters dispersed after hearing this. And Edward's move can be said to kill two birds with one stone. Both explain acquit yourself of fraud and disperse the supporters. The director had no choice but to obediently let him go. The prince is furious again, scolding, "The chief is a waste. You have to do everything by yourself." In a hurry, he disguised himself as an ordinary person and came to the theater. Edward is still performing as usual. It's just a little different this time. It's a magic trick. I saw Edward holding out his palm directly summoned the ghost of dead love Sophie. The audience immediately asked her, "Who killed you? Is that the prince?" Sophie said the killer was at the scene and the prince happened to be there. This performance completely ignited the anger of the audience. Someone found the chief of police on the spot. Let him bring the prince to justice. Of course the prince is angry. Tell the chief to arrest Edward directly next time. But the chief is a little bit impatient. Get Edward now. Tell him to stop performing that trick, otherwise it will really send him to jail soon. The next show will start. The director is looking forward to adorable Edward still summons Sophie's ghost. The audience is also an instant fire. They cursed at the prince. Chief can't sit still. Go straight to the stage and announce Edward's arrest. Although the audience is already furious, but the moment he reached out to grab someone caught and empty, the audience was also stunned. I saw Edward getting up, slowly, drew a soldier's sword, and then just disappeared. It's obviously a ghost too. Afterwards, the director and others asked every staff member. I searched every corner but couldn't find Edward. Can only come to his house to search, but also nothing. Suddenly a book caught the director's attention. Open it. Inside is a sketch of a necklace pendant. It doesn't seem interesting, but then the chief thought of something. This pendant looks familiar. He immediately ran to the prince's horse and rummaged through it. Sure enough, I found a pendant exactly the same as the drawing found after disassembly. It contains a picture of Edward as a child. This is obviously Sophie's pendant. Inadvertently he also found a sapphire, also very familiar. The director will soon come to the prince's accessories. There is a defect on the top and get one is a sapphire and the other is apparently in the ruby found on Sophie's body. That means it was the prince who killed Sophie. The chief is about to arrest the prince, but the prince is tough. Say, "I didn't kill anyone and you have no right to arrest me." The chief said, "I didn't, but your father has. I have reported it, including your intention to usurp the throne." The prince got angry and took out his pistol. Asked him to hand over his accessories. Exactly at this time the king's soldiers are coming. The prince suddenly panicked and became incoherent, and the next knock completely defeated him. The next second, he shot himself directly. Then the soldiers broke in. The director can only bite the bullet and explain to them. Fortunately, he was not wronged in the end. On the way out, a boy called him, gave him a package. Inside is a book. In the book is a deciphered map of Edward pooping orange trees. This was once the director's dream magic trick. But now he's a little confused. When I took out my pocket, I found that the necklace was missing. Apparently just stolen by Edward. There's a crutch in front of him, who looks very similar. The chief immediately followed up. Edward went all the way to the station and got on a train. The director came one step too late and failed to catch up. What did the chief suddenly think of? Edward had arranged helpers here before, and the coroner who helped formally pronounce Sophie dead. Could it be that Sophie faked her death? Let's talk about it. From the night she was killed, Sophie came to the prince's bedroom early, drugged the wine, then intentionally provoked the prince, lead it to horse coupons, wait until the prince is in a coma, and then create the illusion that he was killed, then pretended to be stabbed and fell on horseback to leave. Edward was the first to run to Sophie. The next day she must have given Sophie some sort of potion, slow down her heartbeat with forensic assistance. Easily fooled. The chief and other policemen then give Sophie the antidote to wake her up. Thinking of this, the chief laughed. Isn't this a wonderful magic trick? On the other side, Edward himself came to a paradise. Sophie is here waiting for her. The two finally live the happy life they dreamed of. This is a suspense film staged in 2006. The prince's death is actually a tragedy. That night Edward proposed to elope with Sophie, but Sophie says if elope, the prince will hunt them down everywhere. That's why Edward designed the game. I want to pretend to be a prince. I just didn't expect many princes to be so fragile. He was shot and killed by the chief after only saying a few words. Okay, thank you for watching.